Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Let's Talk Stroke. I am your host, Jerry Wald, stroke survivor, and I started this show not only to spread awareness about brain injury, such as stroke, TBI, aphasia, AVMs, but also to provide a platform for all survivors that can share their journeys, what they're going through, and to show that you're not alone. Also, to bring on professional experts, as today's guest. We're going to talk about different methods regarding rehab and what Motus Nova can do for you. So my guest is Dr. Nick Housley, and he's the director of clinical research and also the host of Motus Nova Rehab Power Hour, which is on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So why don't you guys ask questions? Let's have fun, make comments, and why don't we go ahead and get this started?
Telling me to dance, taking a chance. Telling me to dance, taking a chance.
All right, here I am. And Dr. Nick, I'm going to bring on 1 second. Good, you guys, and thanks for making comments here. I really appreciate it. And please ask questions. Please do that. So let's bring on Dr. Nick Housley from Motus Nova.
Hey, good morning, Jerry. Welcome.
I'm glad you're here.
I'm still in my Rehab Power Hour mode, so I apologize. I'm actually doing it's your host, it's your show, so I guess I should be thanking you for having me on your show today.
Oh no, thank you for being here, and I really appreciate it. And yeah, I just wanted, but really, I love watching your Power Hour, Rehab Power Hour, because we learn so many things about that.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, and you could see all the comments, so I brought them up here. So, good morning,
I just want to say
everyone.
good morning. Yeah, good morning. I think got a Salud. I remember I've been on a couple times, Jerry. I think Salud, welcome. Thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much for sharing your time this morning. I think a lot of people. Great. Stacy's here. Ray, Jana. Thanks so much. So so Jerry, so what's on your mind this morning? I know we have a couple things to chat about, but I want to kind of cue off of you and see exactly what kind of things you want to chat about.
Yeah, you know what, I'm so glad you're on. What I really wanted to chat about is I thought I was really using the hand metro. Everybody can probably see it here, and I felt I was really, at my game. But then when Parth or whoever put the additional therapies, the games on this, wow, this now it's like a competition because you can actually see how many. It's up to 3 people, right, that you could see. Yeah, I'm probably not saying it the right way. You can probably say that, but now I'm like, my game is like, yesterday I did an hour and a half, and I probably could have gone more, but my wife and
families in life calls, right?
Yeah.
Very, very understandable. Yeah, I think it's a great point, Jerry, to make up. And I think we've been striving to make improvements in a lot of the games. And so it might be helpful just really quickly to kind of give a little bit of background I don't know if everyone here is familiar with the Motus hand and kind of who we are, Motus Nova. So that might be helpful to kind of give a little bit of backstory here. So long story short, Motus Nova is dedicated to help individuals with disabilities from neurologic injuries recover their upper and lower extremity function, period. And we can do everything, we'll do everything we can to help in that process. And I think our main focus is with these robotic-based rehabilitation approaches. And Jerry has one of those on his right-hand side there, and that is the Motus hand.
Right here,
and this is, exactly. And so it's really kind of based off of this concept called repetitive task practice or constraint-induced movement therapy, where you're doing a lot of high-intensity repetitive practice that causes positive changes in our brains. And there's many ways you can get constraint therapy or this type of repetitive task practice. But there are more fun ways to do it too. And I think robotics and gaming is one of those sort of key features that we have now. And so with respect to the games itself, right, it provides a couple of key features, and that is it's fun, it's motivating, but also something that Jerry's mentioned here, kind of an undercurrent, is that it also helps provide some challenge, right? And we can modify that environment to make it more stimulating, or more challenging for you, right? We can change the velocity that you have to move, right? Or we can change some of the parameters, like maybe we'll change the virtual environment to make it maybe a bit harder to know exactly what you have to do, right? We might flip axes, for instance, and trick your brain. But that's all with the express purpose of making you have a better rehab experience and make your progress more, in my case, more generalizable. And that's an interesting concept to bring up. And that's this idea of, yeah, we can do these movements in the robotic systems, but that's all well and good. But the thing I really care about is the long-term function, right? When you put that Motus hand down, when you take your Motus foot off, are you going to have residual improvements in your function? That's the thing that we care about. And that's this concept of generalizability, right? It's basically you do something, you do a dedicated intervention somewhere, but then what does it mean for your daily life effectively? That's the real kind of nuts and bolts.
Right, exactly. And I do want to mention one thing is
Sure.
About 2 weeks ago, I getting in bed and I pulled something. I thought I heard a pop in my is it the clavicle back there near the wing or whatever it's called?
Yeah, so the clavicle is kind of up here. If you guys kind of can draw, basically it's kind of a straight line across. This is what is our clavicle. And the thing on the back is our scapula. And those two things kind of go together. And the scapula actually has, in the tip of it, it has what's called the glenoid. And that's why the top of the humerus sits on that. And it's what's called the glenohumeral joint, which is effectively our shoulder. But really, the shoulder is like actually a bunch of different joints, because that actually encompasses the SC joint, the AC joint, the glenohumeral joint, a bunch of things. So it's actually quite complex. But yeah, that could be a problem.
Well, what happened is I heard it so bad that I had to call my doctor and say, I need to get an MRI. I asked him for an X-ray. He goes, no, it sounds like you need to get an MRI because the pain was so bad. So, but what I'm trying to get to is I can't get my MRI till the 26th of this month. That's how backed up they are. So I took some pain pills and CBD cream, something to help, and didn't really do a lot. So I put the hand mentor on, and I used it probably for maybe half hour or so. Oh my gosh, it started feeling better. People think it's just the hand, the hand, the range of motion with the hand. But somehow it's helping my 100% better. I mean, it's not totally better, but it helped the shoulder. So
yeah, and this is something that's really interesting, Jerry. I think you mentioned now, not to suggest that if you do have some orthopedic injury in your shoulder, Jerry, not to suggest that the Motus hand is going to be helped to either diagnose or treat that. But what can be said is that we do actually see improvements in shoulder function after use of the Motus hand. And this is a little bit strange because, well, if you look at it, it's not actually around the shoulder, right? So the question is then, well, why the heck does that happen?
Yeah,
I mean, it's a little interesting, and there's a number of reasons why. And it turns out that sort of one of the cool neuroscience-y reasons is if you kind of peer into the brain a little bit and you do some evaluations on how the neurons are kind of functionally connected, and that is when one of them fires, which other ones fire kind of around it. It turns out that when you do a lot of hand activity, you get a lot of activity up the kinematic chain. And this actually makes sense because our brain is actually kind of structured in these sort of functional little subnetworks. And so if you're doing a lot of this dedicated task practice with the hand, you actually stand the chance of actually activating those networks that cause our shoulder muscles to contract. Yeah. And so by nature of kind of doing that dedicated intervention to the hand, you get that kind of synchronous activation back up to the shoulder. It's a little bit not true if you go the other way around, though. So if you do kind of shoulder function itself, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get improvements in your hand.
Right.
And so I think with you, Jared, what could be happening is because the shoulder relies so much on muscle forces to keep it in place.
Right.
That's very, very, very different than like the hip, for instance. The hip, very bony, has a lot of bony stability, right? It's like a
Right.
pretty good, there's a lot of overlap. Imagine like this, the hip kind of goes around and it's really hard to kind of pull out of a socket. The shoulder is exactly the opposite, in which case it's kind of like a golf ball sitting on a tee, and the golf ball very unstable. And so if you have some problems with the instability, something kind of popped or moved around, and you are then working on having some improved tone, some improved muscle control of your shoulder, it stands to reason then that that could help improve your symptoms.
Right. Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. I kept thinking, okay, there must be a muscle that something's going up to make this feel better. And
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And
so
also too movement, right? Movement.
yeah,
I mentioned, I don't know if you were there last night, but someone was asking me about the inflammation and edema. And I brought up a really funny kind of thing we learned back in rehab school and PT school, is this idea of motion is lotion. It's a funny thing, right? But it is in fact pretty true, right? Motion does help a lot of things, not only joint health, but it also helps perception of pain. It helps alleviate pain. So
absolutely. And I do see some questions here too.
yeah. So let's see here. Yeah, I think I first want to say, Kimmy, thanks so much, Kimmy Burton. I think the scientific language makes my neurons fire like crazy. Yes, it does mine too.
That is
it's
cool. She'll be on my show Thursday, by the way.
Okay, very good. Kimmy, be great to kind of know what kind of things specifically you're interested in chatting about. I'm happy to go into details. I think let's see here. Let's see. I got one here. Karen, are there any foundations? I'm just going to go down the line here. Are there any foundations out there that help to pay to get one? So Karen, great question. I think feel free, reach out to us. I think there are a number of things that we can, I guess the crew at Motus is going to know kind of the most updated situation. So just reach out to us and we'll try to get, we'll do everything we can to help people get access to the Motus hand and Motus foot. So do reach out to us though. Yeah, I think, Jerry, thanks so much for putting that there, the info@motusnova.com. You can also reach out to us on the Facebook group too. We're pretty active there. And so if you have questions there about getting access to one of the systems, let us know and we'll be sure to do all we can to help you there. Let's see here. Let's see if I can get all of the comments here. Question here from Don. He's asking me to explain the new prototype for fingers is designed to accomplish. Ooh, okay. Now, Don, I don't know if I want to give so much away here, but the word is on the street, maybe through the grapevine, that there may be another potential version of the Motus hand. It may have some additional functions. And let's say hypothetically, if I were to design something, one of the next things that I would like to do is to focus on dedicated finger assistance and resistance. Wow. So maybe Don, you can kind of put that together. And I guess to maybe answer your question specifically, what it's designed to do. Again, if I were to hypothetically design a neck system that had some focus on the fingers, I think it would be exceptionally important to work on being able to not only work on the wrist and the hand, but being able to have those motions be kind of uncoupled.
Right.
And what I mean by that is, most of us, and actually you can do this with, if you have a more impaired side or the other side, you'll say your less impaired side, you can actually just move your fingers up, right? And I'm just completely relaxed here. And they will kind of by nature actually just go into flexion as I go into wrist extension. And this is actually just a mechanical coupling of the way our fingers have evolved, basically. And it's what's called a tenodesis grip. And this is just how the mechanics of our systems work, of our arms work and our hands work. But by nature, I have the ability to actually go up here into extension, okay? But I can also extend my fingers. So that's a really important aspect, right, for just daily life. And so it'd be really good to be able to go up into extension and actually work on finger movements in various amounts of wrist movement. So again, Don, hypothetically, if I were to design something, that would probably be where I would focus. And I think there are a number of systems out there that work on kind of passively extending your fingers and your wrist. That is true. But I think having this active ability to do that assistance sense those movements, and also sense force to help with grip strength. Those would be critical components to a next version, as if you can imagine that being designed. So I think those would be kind of the things to look out for, Don. Okay.
Yeah, that's terrific. And it is funny. Some people have different with the hand mentor or any kind of rehab. Some people get results quicker than others. Really, for me, my case, it made a huge difference. I mean, pretty much within a week, I started seeing some results, but then that made me want to go further and further and faster and do more. So then I kind of stopped because I got to, I with my hand up, but I got to a point where I could do my hand now. But for me, I really need to get the range of motion for the flexion and, so it's really making a big difference. And when you put the new therapies on here, the games, I like the Plinko. I can't even push it. It's so hard. So I tried hard. I mean, I had to hold my arm down. So we'll have to kind of adjust mine there.
Yeah, I think we can totally do that. I think, Jerry, that's of course important. I think one of the things that needs to be mentioned too is there's kind of a distribution of games in terms of, I call them games. They're really therapeutic exercises, but there's a distribution of difficulty. And I think another thing that's coming down the pike, guys, is this concept of modifying the difficulty in each of the individual games. Again, we're working basically, full tilt to make all these things happen. But this is one of the next things down the pike that will be happening. And this will allow us to basically give people access to more and more games that have tailoring within game, which is really, really important. So I think, Jerry, when you have maybe you have this kind of progression where that you're building up the capacity in the games, but maybe a game just by definition is maybe much harder. Yes. And maybe we need to kind of simplify some of the things, maybe make it a little bit easier in terms of the ranges of motion that you're operating in, because it's very, very hard. A great example of this is we have the ability to help someone gain access to a lot of movement, right? But having precision control, someone may also want to work on that precision control. And that could be, you can imagine as being kind of like a subset of the range of motion. And so what I mean by this, let's say for you instance, Jerry, maybe you have the ability to move precisely in maybe 10 or 15 degrees of movement, but you have the capacity volitionally to go up to greater movements. Right. But because it's really challenging, you may want to have a restricted amount of movement to work in so you can actually access those sort of precision games. Mm-hmm. And so what we want to do in that case is maybe have some sort of game discrimination where you're working on a very, very precise degree of gradation of movement capabilities. That would be really important for you to be able to pick up, let's say, for instance, a pencil or pen, yes. Right? And be able to do very, very fine amounts of movements to start writing again, right? You guys can appreciate this right now. Just look at the tip of my pen here. Very, very small amounts of movement will allow me to write. I don't need to go into great movements unless I'm doing calligraphy or something like this, or writing on a chalkboard. But right. For most of us, we just need a fine amount of control. And so, that kind of idea of discriminating games with precision motions and having games dedicated to more gross motor function, really rational. So I think that could be something that would help too, Jerry. But I think to your point specifically, let's certainly go through and check to make sure that those settings are actually tuned up for you, though. I think that would be quite helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I really do like this, if you get down to the nitty gritty, me going to therapy. Mm-hmm. My wife takes off work, and right, and even the gas to go there and back, and and the co-pays. So at home, with this, touch screen, you can do as much as you can handle all day long for therapy, and that's what I really love about this, and it makes a big difference. And I can see a lot of people out here that are still asking questions here, and Kimmy, that's a long one there. I can't even, but
yeah. Well, let me first, I think you're bringing up an important point there, Jerry, this idea of kind of barriers to accessing rehab.
Right.
I think this is something that's quite near and dear to our hearts at Motus, and it's really, really an interesting thing, right? I mean, we know that there's something on the order of 7 million stroke survivors who are in the United States. There's around 800,000 to a million new cases every year.
Yes.
And not everyone is a close to a rehab center, and not everyone has great access to clinicians, either just by proximity or by nature of not having those skilled providers close to you. And then, of course, there's kind of geographic issues, right? And then, of course, there are also issues with scheduling, right? Because there are finite amounts of rehab specialists, and then there's a finite amount of scheduling time. And then you kind of put these two things together. You're kind of dealt with a really challenging hand to deal with. And when you put this together, and so that's bad enough, right?
Yes.
But then when you put this together with the concepts that we know fundamental to the requirements to recovering from neurologic injury, knowing that we need hundreds or thousands of hours of rehab to actually really induce long-lasting changes, this is just sort of incongruent with the way that we can actually deliver care in the United States, at least, and actually much of the world, to be frank.
Right.
And this is one of the reasons why robotic systems have been developed, right? And robotic systems are not new in rehab. Right. They've been around for a long time, and this is kind of the promise is always a decade away, right? And that is, robotics will help workforce multiplier, these sort of things. But it's been really hard to actually get something out to the masses, the masses of stroke survivors who need this, because of all the issues of making something that's effective to start with, safe, and scalable, right? These three things all three things have to happen, right? It's kind of like a stool. If you don't have one of them, the stool falls down. And a lot of places, a lot of different systems have gotten two of them, but they haven't gotten the third one. And honestly, the hardest thing is the scalability to making something actually work, across the country and to the amount of people that it actually has to serve. And so it's what is exactly what motivates us every day. And this is this disconnect between the needs and the availability of resources for individuals who have suffered strokes, and of course their care partners. And so I've actually done a number of studies on this, and the numbers are quite frightening when it comes to thinking about the actual costs associated with stroke care, and the numbers are very, very large, right? If you look at the literature, some of the estimates are on the order of above $10,000 a year that people spend. This is after year one. So this is after your acute phase. This is all post-acute care. So I think the estimates are something like $17,000 of annual charges, and $10,000 or $11,000 of that was rehab costs. Something like $6,000 or $5,500 or $6,000 were all medication costs on average. And so big costs. And this is not even considering the amount of rehab that is actually needed.
Right.
Sorry about that, Jerry. My coffee maker's turning off there.
It's okay. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and so it's something that's very, very important to recognize. This is a big barrier, and something that can go in the home. Right, it's right there with you. You're using it in your home. Hundreds of stroke survivors are using this across the country in their homes right now. Yeah. Being able to deliver care in the home safely and effectively we think is the way to do this. It's not going to replace rehab in the clinic or hospital, but it is certainly a necessity to actually, improving the long-term outcomes of individuals.
Yeah, I completely agree. I wish I had this when I was in the hospital 10 years ago. It would have made a huge difference. But even 10 days to 10 years, I'm still seeing improvements. And I noticed that by using this, and so I see a lot of people asking about it. But yeah, I put the thing up, info@motusnova.com, and reach out.
Yeah, and then if you have questions, right? I mean, we're on the Facebook. We're also on there's the support group, right? And so everyone's welcome to the support group. So if you have questions, you don't feel comfortable asking one of us, that's fine. Ask someone in the community, right? That's what it's there for. And of course, it doesn't have to be like Motus stuff. It can be general neuro rehab, right? I love those questions too. But post the questions. Give me, if you have specific things that you would like me to jump in on, if you'd like to learn about a paper or whatever, or even just a general rehab question, tag me in it, and I'll jump in. If you've seen any of my responses, they're lengthy, and I'll dive into the details with you. I'll dive head first in that stuff. So no worries there.
Yeah, exactly. And I haven't used the foot mentor, but pretty much the same results as far as the.
Yep. Yeah, I think the Motus foot is a little bit different in terms of course, it's the hand versus the foot, so that's a pretty big distinction. But when it comes to sort of what we're focused on, that's all gait, right? It's all how you walk, and can we improve people's walking? So I think there's been some studies, some smaller studies looking at sort of foot drop in terms of like the direct effects on those muscles and these sort of things. But those are a bit nuanced. I think the most important thing that we can all kind of appreciate is how far can you walk and how fast can you walk? Right. Those are kind of a couple big things that are really, really important.
Right. I have to change my thinking, not the foot mentor or hand mentor. It's the Motus foot and the Motus hand.
Yeah. So, yeah. No, it's fine. They're all the same to me. I think it was funny. A number of individuals just started calling them Motus hand and Motus foot, and we're like, okay, if that works for you guys, we'll adopt it. So. A lot of questions here, I think. I don't know, Gary, am I able to scroll down and see things? I don't know if I'm able to do that.
Let's see what I could do. I could change this here.
Okay.
See,
I know there was just a bunch of comments. I was just trying to make sure I could see them all.
Let's see which.
I could see the bottom one. I can see here of Kimmy mentioning I like all the scientific talk because then I can further my research in a specific area that's highlighted. Thank you so much. Everything you're discussing is wonderful. Great. Very, very good. That was the end of that comment I could see, but I thanks so much for that comment, Kimmy. Let's see. I think there's one here from Yvonne. For 8 years, I've woken up the total extension of my fingers. I can write for short periods of time. Yes, Yvonne, tell me about this. I mean, do you have impairments? I think maybe earlier on in your comments, you might have said something about you have difficulty going into flexion. Is that correct?
And she's from Athens, Greece.
Okay, gotcha. So Yvonne, did you have a stroke or did you have another type of neurologic injury? Because I think it's actually quite uncommon to have extension impairments, or I guess to have flexion impairments with stroke and only have the ability to go into extension. I think it's much more of a standard. Interesting, Yvonne, very interesting. So I think it's very much more common to have the ability to go into flexion as opposed to into extension. This is far more difficult for most people. So it's interesting. It might be nice to kind of see what's going on with you. And there's a simple reason for that, right? It's really just because the upper extremity, our flexors are just generally stronger. So just kind of that kind of a tug of war, if you imagine, the tug of war gets won by the stronger of the two individual muscles there.
Let's see, Billy.
So it looks like I think it's brain, maybe aneurysm. Billy, let me know there. And 3 major strokes in November 16, 2008. Billy, I think, we can certainly talk about this. I think, Jerry is a great example of this. Someone who is 10 years plus post injury, and this is. I will regularly get on this soapbox, guys, and that is, it's a big soapbox for me, and that is this idea that physicians and clinicians will tell you that whatever you have after 6 months, a year, whatever, is what you have, and that's just patently false, right? We know from many, many studies in literature that there is recovery that can be made many years post-stroke, right? Now, there's a couple of qualifiers to this, and that is that I think early on, you can maybe expect to see kind of more ROI, if you can imagine. And that is ROI mean return on investment, such that maybe in the first kind of 6 months, you might do maybe 1 hour of rehab gives you kind of X amount of function back. But an hour, maybe 2 years down the line, may give you a little bit less than X, if you imagine. So there's a little bit of a change in time, change of sort of efficacy, if you imagine, with respect to time, but that doesn't go down to 0. And the other really interesting thing, actually, guys, is that learning, and actually, I think maybe Dave and I are doing a podcast about this. in a future episode. Learning, fundamentally, the concept of motor learning is slightly different after a stroke, which is really interesting. So we may have to make some considerations for how learning processes are different, and kind of the 15 or so fundamental determinants of motor learning, how those change after stroke, and how we may need to modify things to help people maximize their capacity to learn. So it's kind of an interesting idea, right? It's the brain's just a little bit different after a stroke, and so we have to kind of accommodate new ways to help it get the best outcome.
Right. That's what you call rewiring the brain, neuroplasticity.
Yeah. I mean, the term sort of neuroplasticity gets thrown around a lot. I think generally there's positive plasticity, there's negative plasticity. This concept of maladaptive plasticity is kind of negative connotation to it. But then so plasticity is kind of like a suite of mechanisms that actually result in a change in function of the network in the brain. Now, I think that is sort of a lower level in terms of how neurons function, as opposed to kind of a higher level, kind of a meta level, if you allow me to use the term, to how you actually learn. Because it's a little hard to say, okay, well, we can actually do kind of a fun exercise here, Jerry. If you have two neurons and they're connected to each other, and one of them fires and it changes the way this guy fires, would you call that learning? It's hard.
Boy. Yeah,
it's hard, right? Okay, so then let's do the next one. Okay, if we have three neurons together and one of them fires and it kind of changes something over here in the other two, now is that learning? Now we can call that plasticity because we can measure that, but okay, so let's scale it up. Okay, but we have 86 billion neurons in our brain, and something happens, and we'll call that learning, right? So where along the spectrum does it change from plasticity to learning? It's really kind of interesting.
But that's is that? I mean, if it's just two neurons, repetitions, then those two probably fire at the same time. I'm just because I'm maybe not a scientist like you.
So I can tell you this. So this is getting a little bit into the weeds. I've actually done these experiments myself, where I'm recording from two individual neurons, and what happens is if you put current in one of the neurons, and let's say they have to be connected, of course. So a synapse between them, if they're connected, if you put current in one of the neurons, that forces it to fire. And this neuron over here will respond. It will have what's called a postsynaptic potential, and it will respond. Now, what I can say is, if you do the stimulus 1 millisecond out of the optimal, it will cause the other neuron to actually suppress its firing. It'll suppress its response. So these systems are exquisitely sensitive to what's called initial conditions. And so if you have subtle differences, I'm talking on the millisecond time scale, subtle differences in their firing, you can go from having something that's positively plastic to negatively plastic. And so very, very difficult to kind of abstract these little sort of cellular responses that we call plasticity up to the motor learning phenomenon.
Right. Wow. Interesting. Whew.
Yeah, it gets rough in a hurry. So that's why I was saying, like, we throw these terms around plasticity, but it's really complex, really complex. So it kind of matters, like, what scale are we talking about?
Right. Let's see, Doctor. I could bring it up here. From Kimmy, you are a refresher, I think. Or
okay,
I think so, Kimmy, right?
Learning or mimicking. Interesting. Okay. So I don't know if you're asking, Kimmy, are you asking if I'm a researcher? So yeah, I mean, I am actually. So I'm also a clinician. So I'm of a doctorate of physical therapy, but I'm also have a PhD in neuroscience. And so yeah, I am a researcher, and I do fundamental neuroscience, meaning studying how single neurons work and how networks of neurons work under normal circumstances. And then what happens after they are injured, for instance. And so study these sort of mechanisms of plasticity. But interestingly enough, I study them mostly when things go wrong. So when they're misbehaving. So it's So I think I don't study necessarily the processes of learning in the systems that I study. I do that in terms of my clinical work, but not in the basic science stuff. I don't know, learning or mimicking though. I'm not sure what you mean by learning or mimicking. Do you know, Jerry? Maybe Kimmy, if you wouldn't mind, maybe give me, flesh that question out a little bit more. I'd be happy to dive in.
Yeah, yeah. And we'll ask because Kimmy will be on Thursday, so
Sure.
I probably won't remember what she said. So we got a lot, but I do, and I see Yvonne said she was on my show not too long ago, and she had 5 strokes.
Okay.
But yeah,
so Yvonne, so 2 bleeds and 3 ischemic strokes. Yeah. So Yvonne, I guess when you have sort of compounded kind of injuries, yeah, you can occasionally get these kind of mixed phenomenon. I think we were talking about you having the ability to go down or up into extension, but having some problems going into flexion. So I think, yeah, if you have these sort of compounded things that can occur, then yeah, you might experience some of these more sort of non-standard or non-canonical type of symptoms. So that could be very much what's going on.
Right. And I know that Salud, you've seen her out there in the world. Yeah. Her husband just recently, maybe sorry, Salud, maybe a month ago that he just passed away.
Okay.
But his range of motion was amazing. But Salud,
well, I'm really sorry, Salud. Yeah, I'm very sorry to hear that.
Yes. Research. Okay. There we go, Kimmy.
Yeah, quite all right. Yeah. Yeah, actually, it's funny enough, Kimmy, I do study ataxia. That's one of the things that I focus on as a behavioral measure. Yeah, because I actually study kind of the spinal circuits, if you will, how they generate movement. So the brain's interesting, right? The brain can actually cause movements to occur, but what's interesting, almost all of the coordination happens at the spinal level. So like when you walk, none of that's coming from your brain. All that's coming from your spinal cord, which is really interesting. When you do a lot of these sort of reaching tasks, all that's coordinated from the spinal circuits. And it's actually what happens when you have a discoordination in your brain because of an injury, of a stroke, for instance. It actually causes the connections from our brain down to our spinal cord, and those normally very, very organized circuits in our spinal cord become discoordinated. And that's where you guys have if you have impairments from a stroke, that's why you have these kind of upper extremity discoordinations, right? You may try to like reach for something, and when you reach for it, you maybe overshoot or you undershoot, right? Or you have difficulty trying to, uncouple your wrist and your hand, these sort of things.
Right.
Yeah, it's coming from this sort of breakdown in the total kind of coordination of the systems from our cortex down to our muscles, really.
And it's the same with the hand mentor when I'm using that.
Yeah, actually, so this is important to mention too. I think, right, this is helping rewire kind of or generate the signals that are required to rewire both of those pathways, right? So like your spinal circuits are not actually, there's a little bit of evidence that they're corrupt following a stroke, but it's really you're trying to get the brain to reconnect in the appropriate way to your spinal circuits. And to then generate those movements again. That's why it's focused on this kind of fundamental concept of the building block, if you will, of extension of the wrist, flexion of the wrist, and opening of the hand and closing of the hand. So yeah, that's why we focus on those sort of fundamental components of building blocks of upper extremity movement.
Oh, it's great to know all those things. The science behind this is pretty remarkable. I mean, this alone, really, I wish I could pull up my touch screen here, but this is just amazing that you did all the research on this, and
there's not me in terms of I've done not all of it. I've been working with the systems since about 2013, about 2012, 2013. And David and I worked on the clinical trials together. David was the effectively lab manager running some of the clinical trials. And I was one of the clinicians there. And this is before I went and got my PhD. And so I was a clinician working on the projects and, basically trying to test before we got involved. There were a number of the studies that were done in the clinic or hospital, right? It was kind of your standard system, right? It was a tool that clinics could have come in and use a a treadmill or exercise equipment. But again, as you identified before, Jerry, that's great, but it needs to be deployed in the home. There's a lot of benefits to having something deployed in the home.
Oh, yeah.
And so we were the ones to kind of take that step of, let's take this clinic-based tool and see if it works out in the real world in people's homes. And so that's where we were involved in those steps. And then of course we did a bunch of studies on sort of the economics of it, how it can help systems reduce costs. Does it still work and is still safe in the home? And then David and I did a number of kind of fundamental studies about what kind of things does it change in the brain? How does this kind of rehab induce changes in the brain? Some really interesting things that we learned about that. And then also some sort of really cool advances in technology using different sort of sensors, using sort of combination approaches and these sorts of things. So yeah, David and I have been working on this stuff for a long time now.
Yeah, it's amazing. Brooke, thanks for being here. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I think there's some other, so I don't know if any other questions or Yvonne, you're
fully extend my fingers and close my fingers. I can extend the wrist up and down. Oh, no worries at all, Yvonne. I was just trying to understand your situation. I think it was, I don't think it was misleading at all. I was just trying to make sense of it. So yeah, thanks so much for letting me know though. So it sounds like you can fully extend your fingers and close your fingers and extend the wrist up and down. So that's really good. Hopefully I'm understanding you correctly. Is that kind of what you're thinking, Jerry?
Yeah, I think so. That's right. We do appreciate what you're doing, Dr. Nick.
Thanks. Yeah, guys. Well, I think it's also too, so Salute, you mentioned, you're thanking us for what we do for survivors. I think one of the most important things too that we need to mention is someone like you, Salute. It's also the care partners and family members and friends of survivors. There's, I think, so much of the research world is focused on helping the individual who has the direct impairments, right?
Right.
And that's great. That's awesome. But we also need to consider the people that surround that individual, right? And this concept of care partners and the burden that they take on to help that individual recover. And so I think that's a really, really important aspect that we need to A, recognize, and B, see what we can do to help support them so they can continue to have their life and basically provide them the backup and support to help the survivor that they're working with.
Yeah.
So that's a really, really important message. So I see your thank you, Salute, and I will parlay back with a thank you to you for helping your husband in his recovery, in his journey.
Yeah. So if there's is there any other questions out there? Because this is a chance where Dr. Nick can firsthand answer them, because I don't want to confuse anybody. But
no, it's fine. Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah, exactly.
You know me, Jerry. I love questions. So
I know, and you know how to answer them the right way. But
I try my best. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
I don't get everything right, but I will acknowledge when I get something wrong, or if I don't know the answer, I'll be the first one to say, hey, that's not really up my alley, but I will find someone who does, or I'll find the answer. Let's put it that way.
And your Rehab Power Hour is on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays, and Wednesday different time. Wednesday, isn't it?
Yeah. So Mondays we're on at 8 p.m. Eastern time, guys. By the way, so I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. So if you're ever in the area, come by and say hi. But then and Fridays are 7 p.m. Eastern. And then on Wednesdays, we kind of go a little bit flexible. So sometimes we'll go kind of like 1 p.m., maybe 3 p.m., or sometimes we'll go later. I think it honestly depends on when we have guests. We try to accommodate individuals based on their schedule. So I guess going forward, we're going to have some researchers and some scientists who might be international. Oh, wow. And so we may have to kind of go a little bit outside of our normal time frames to welcome them to the Rehab Power Hour. Really? But generally speaking, I think on Tuesday, I think we actually have it scheduled for 5 p.m. Eastern time.
Wow. Okay.
So just a heads up, guys. But what I'll do my best on the Monday show to kind of let you guys know when the Wednesday one will be, and of course we'll post it on Facebook and all that good stuff. Yeah,
and I'll share it too as soon as
sure. Yeah.
We know the times, but yeah, that'd be great. Is there? Okay, Cheryl, thank you. Well, it's not for me, it's for Dr. Nick. Thank you for your time, and that's awesome, and information. Is there anything else we did not cover? Because
Yeah, well, I think, maybe what we can do, Jerry, is, as you mentioned, actually doing a quick assessment at some point. I don't know if we have the time to do it now, but maybe we can schedule maybe for one of your next shows, we can actually jump on really quickly and do a 20-minute kind of demo of like, let's do the assessment. Let's jump in it. And yeah.
I would love that, because it'd be interesting to see, because it's a lot different than before they added games. And just by the way, I've been getting so many people on Twitch, which I never really heard. So many people that are stroke survivors, and
really
they've seen me use this hand mentor, and they've been reaching out to me. Where do I get this? How do I do this? And because it's a gaming type thing, so now so people know this is on Twitch, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, LinkedIn, all at the same time right now.
Okay. So Twitch, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I am a gamer insofar as I can use it to help individuals recover from stroke. But so I think, it'd be interesting to kind of see what the community there at Twitch has for us in terms of feedback for games, right? I think Twitch is really kind of like a social media kind of game where you can kind of log in and see individuals playing their game. So I wonder if that'd be a cool concept of maybe Jerry actually doing a live game session where we kind of will go on and I might walk you through some of the individual games, some of the new ones maybe even.
That would be terrific. I can switch it around to make Twitch the first, and then YouTube and all the stuff.
We can have you kind of play, and I can kind of provide live commentary on what the individual, what you're doing. That way it won't detract from your rehab, right? Because that's the most important thing, right? You got to get your rehab, Jerry. And then I can provide the commentary to help you, help everyone kind of understand what's going on.
Yeah. Because it's usually after the show we end, then I start getting the comments coming up.
Okay.
Many about from Twitch, and I never even, before I did this, I never knew about Twitch. I didn't, but then my wife said that one of her coworkers is a gamer, and that is what they do, is get on Twitch, and just like you said, all these games, and people are starting to see, and then they're referring to a game with a therapy game. So I think it's terrific.
Yeah. I mean, again, I think unfortunately, stroke doesn't care who you are, right? No. So if there are individuals who like gaming, they're likely going to be affected by stroke. And so I think, if we can help you guys in your path to recovery, we can make it fun, and then let's do it.
Yeah, and it's for me, it's changed since I got the new games therapies on this. It's I don't want to leave the office because it's nice to see that it's in real time. With other users, up to 3 users that are shown.
And we will, and we're building on that as well. So all these features will be extended, and the functionality will build in the near future.
That's terrific. I think this is perfect. And you've done such a good job, your company, and all that. So.
Well, thank you. Well, to be completely honest, guys, I am just the face here, but there are a lot of people behind this, and so it's really the whole Motus team, and so I think the whole team has done a great job, and it's been a long time coming, right? It's been a lot of time making this work, and we've also learned a lot from you guys, right? I think it's been a very, very helpful kind of reciprocal relationship. Just when you guys have the access to using it, and then you tell us, hey, this is great, this is not so great, right? We learn from that. We love that, because then we know what needs to happen going forward, because we're ultimately trying to help you guys recover, and getting that feedback from you is absolutely critical.
Yeah, absolutely. This is great. And I do appreciate you being on, Dr. Housley. It really made a big difference, and I look forward to doing an assessment.
Let's do it. Let's totally do it, Jerry. And I think so we can do an assessment, and then maybe the next one, maybe we can have this a regular occurrence where we can do an assessment, and then we can maybe do, even a quick segment of just going through some of the individual games, and post it on, and let the Twitch community know. And we can kind of do a live tutorial on each of the individual games. That way everyone else here can kind of understand, hey, these are the cool games coming down the pike, and this is how to play them.
Yeah, and just one other thing.
Sure.
I have gotten to the point where the games that I'm kind of doing good at,
Okay.
I stick to. I know it's not the right way, but I stick to those because solitaire.
Yep.
I'm guilty. I haven't really used it.
Okay.
But there's one other one. I can't remember, but there's so many here. I mean, I suggest this to everybody. Hey, Josh, nice to see you. But I really do. And please reach out to Motus Nova, info@motusnova.com, and fill out. Is there a little form they fill out? And
yeah, pretty simple. So if you just go to the website, you kind of scroll to the bottom, there will be kind of we call it an assessment form. But it's just a little bit of information about you, and it gives us some information so we can have a really informed discussion to see if this is a good fit for you, right? Because that's really, really important. We want to make sure it's a good fit both ways, because we don't want to have systems out there that are not helpful to people. So yeah.
Perfect. That's awesome. Well, any other questions? Otherwise, I appreciate everybody being here, and thank you again, Dr. Nick.
Yeah, of course. Thanks so much, Jerry. Thanks so much to your community. I really appreciate you guys being here. The great questions. I think Kimmy, I hope actually there's a question here from Kimmy. I think hopefully you found the link to either the support group. I think you can go on Facebook, and it's the Motus Nova support group, and you can go on there and find that. So you guys feel free to join. Again, that community is great. It is growing. There's a lot of great individuals there sharing their stories. So do go on there. And if you have questions, just at me. Just type my name, Nick Housley, and I'll pop up. And just make sure you tag me in something, and I'll be sure to dive into the questions if you have them there for me. But yeah, if you have just a general question for Motus about the systems, feel free to go to the website, motusnova.com, or you can email us at info@motusnova.com. We'll also get to us. Basically, any way you reach out to us, we'll be sure to reach out and help you make a really informed decision about advancing your care.
Yeah, and you know what, Kimmy, I'll send you the link to how to find it, and because it is a great group and it is growing. I mean, watching it grow, I mean, that's terrific. So there's obviously a lot of need, as we know.
Yeah, there is.
So all right, we will see you guys on Thursday. Take care.
Excellent.
Yeah, Dr. Nick, I look forward to doing the assessment. Really do.
I'm excited. Assessment and then games.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll go from there.
All right.
Very good.
Take care, you guys.